Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the music education department at Berklee College of Music. And I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is Briana Raucci. Briana is a Connecticut-based artist specializing in film and digital photography, writing, and design. Briana also happens to have multiple disabilities. Over the years, Briana has self-described as a photographer, photojournalist, writer, graphic designer, UX and product designer, social media manager, artist, etc., but feels none of these titles fully embodies the creativity she is constantly trying to express in new ways. After in-depth creative exploration, doing both full-time and freelance work for over 13 years, Briana is now freelancing full-time, utilizing all of her creative abilities. Being a multi-passionate individual, this has allowed her to balance all of her creative endeavors and to add a few more.
Hi, this is the Able Voices podcast. I'm your guest host, Briana Raucci. I'm a disabled artist with cerebral palsy, epilepsy, endometriosis, and a bunch of other fun disorders. I make art for people with disabilities to explain what it's like to live with them. And today I am joined by the lovely Christina, Lucille, who is also a disabled artist. She has MS and endometriosis, and she also creates art for the disabled community. So, Christina, I'd like to start off by asking you about your story as an artist. Like, how did you start? How did you get to where you are today, etc.?
Yeah, I started really late, I feel like, in life. At first, I was training as a classical musician.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a classical singer. I was trained in it for a long time. Yeah, and then, I kind of not outgrew it, but just was looking for something different. I started to feel sick about 18, 19, 20, like really sick. And singing with my voice was starting to get weird, right? It was the MS starting to kick in. So I kind of ventured into acrylic painting on canvas, and that's kind of how I got started. Yeah. But yeah, I just started doing acrylic painting about 18 or 19 years old.
Wow, that's amazing. So you said your MS kicked in when you were about how old?
Um, well, I noticed it when I was 18, 19, but I actually have pediatric MS. So I've had it about for as long as I can remember since I was about 3 or 4.
Okay. And then when you decided to kind of switch, how did you develop? You have Chronic Pop Shop, which is your
Mhm.
shop where you sell all your disabled art. How
Yeah.
did you start that, and how did that pick up and develop to what it is today?
So I started the acrylic painting when I was like, that late age group. And then I was about 22 and I started to show and sell my art around town. This was acrylic on canvas. But then I went through a really bad liver failure from my MS medication. And then I had a bad relapse. And so I kind of had to give up painting, on canvas because my hands were super shaky and it was not fun. My line were, I mean, it was just so like all over the place. And then my partner introduced me to digital art. And I at first was like, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to like switch my mediums. I'm like, I'm never going to do digital. Cause I don't know. I was just so stubborn. And I picked it up one day on her pad, on her little art pad that she had. And I was like, I can actually like make my lines straight on here and I can like actually have some control. So then I kind of started to use Procreate on my iPad and yeah. And then it wasn't until I lost half my vision that I took it more seriously and started to like illustrate more. And I made like notepads because I wanted to help manage my health. And then I opened up the Chronic Pop account on Instagram. And yeah, it just kind of took over from there. And I wanted to do more like funny, relatable, disabled artwork, that you don't really see out there a lot. So
Absolutely. You channeled something that helps you into something that could help other people too with your notepads and, the funny sayings that put. It's hard to have disability. So I like how you channeled it. And it's also interesting that you said you switched to Procreate, because I use it as well. And it is such a good accommodation when you have like shaky hands and everything to kind of get the art in your head out onto not real paper, but the
Yes.
digital medium.
Yes.
Um, so I'd like to ask you about your experiences as a person with disabilities. When you integrate that into your art, like how did it feel when you started talking about that publicly?
Really uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable because I'm just not a vulnerable person. And it's really cheesy to say that like, oh, vulnerability is strength, right? Because I'm like one of those people. I'm like, ugh, the cringe. Like, I don't want to like talk about my feelings.
Mhm.
But you can ask my therapist of 6 years. But I don't know. It just kind of started to become freeing. The more comfortable I got in my art account, the more free I felt.
Mm.
And then definitely when politics started to, come up with last November and stuff, I was like, I'm kind of pissy. And I feel like it's okay for us to be like sad in the disabled and chronically ill community. It's okay to be like happy, but nobody ever said it's okay to be angry.
Mhm.
And so I really wanted to express like the anger that I think a lot of us felt. And so yeah, I just started using that and putting that into my work. It's been it's been fun though. I have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and I can tell, and you can tell through your art that you have fun with it and other people engage with it. You have, such a good, strong following who actually like participate in the work.
Yeah.
So I know our listeners would like to hear about your arts education. I know you kind of like were studying music, which is funny for Berklee,
Yeah.
at first. So what other kinds of art education did you receive? And can you talk about like how you continue to learn your art forms today?
Yeah, I have none.
Okay.
I I have never taken an art class. Like,
Really?
not
Not
I've
even in
never
like
no,
primary
I
school?
no, no, not in high school, not in college, and it's something I really wish I would have, but I was so focused on my education. I actually had to leave school for, like, my relapses. I was studying speech pathology, which
Wow.
makes sense because of my voice, right? And then I had to leave because my MS got so bad, and then, yeah, I was just so focused on getting into graduate school for psychology after that, and I just never had the time, and I wish I would have.
Mm.
Luckily for me, my partner was going to school to be an architect, and she took a lot of art classes and everything. So she actually she's kind of like my teacher.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, I do like self-learning stuff like this sounds so silly. I just was learning like perspective.
Mhm.
And it's so basic, but it's something that I never learned. Like truly, right? It's like going back to the basics is so important as an artist, right?
Absolutely.
And I didn't realize that until I was trying to draw like, a box and I'm like, I can't get this right and I hate geometry.
I struggle with perspective too. It's funny, like that, we're artists and it's like, oh, I feel like I struggle with like some of the basic stuff, but like
Yes.
our creativity leads to other places that you don't necessarily need certain aspects of it. And that's what's so
Right.
fun about art is it can be explorative and you don't need per se like a solid education. Do you think your
Right.
previous education in pathology and like what you were studying plays into your art at all at this point?
Absolutely. Yeah, especially in speech pathology. I was actually specializing in neurology.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and I've taken a lot of anatomy courses. So, me
Mhm.
drawing anatomy, I actually kind of did it on the side when I was a speech patho student. So, it was really, yeah, I don't know. I just picked it up naturally. I just like doodling a lot and designing. So, it was, yeah, it's just been something I did in college. And then I kind of transferred that over to drawing for Chronic Pop. And yeah, it's been fun. I drew a thyroid the other day, I think.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Did
Yeah.
you have any teachers that or professors that knew about your disability and helped you through, like, navigating that time where you were trying to figure out, like, how am I gonna push forward? Like, can you talk about that and your education in terms of your disability?
Yeah, so when I was a speech pathology student, they and I like basically half my body went numb.
Mm,
And I was like, "Oh, I have MS," because I was studying neuro, right? And so I knew right away what it was. And I went in and I told my professors, and they were like, "You shouldn't be a speech pathologist because it's too hard for you." And so I left the program. They were very ableist, extremely. They didn't. It's
yeah.
actually it's actually an area that is very riddled with ableism, unfortunately.
Mm,
But when I did my psychology degree, the rest of my degree, right? They were very accommodating, like very kind, very accommodating. They knew I was trying to get into grad school, so yeah, they helped me a lot. But yeah,
So you're very active as an artist. Can you tell us about your current work? And, obviously you said that you're putting politics into it more and expressing your anger, but, you know, can you tell us a little bit more about how you're exploring all of this?
yeah, yeah. I think I take like inspiration right now from a lot of other disabled people and just listening to them, and also going into the political spaces and seeing what's going on. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
it's funny because I see a lot of other disabled artists on Instagram, right? And like I said, it's really hard to be vulnerable as a disabled person because you're not allowed to be a certain way.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to fill the gaps that are missing. I want to feel like our voices are included and that the voices of being angry are included, or even just I'm super sarcastic. it's it's how I deal with a lot of the trauma.
Yeah. I mean, it's how
Yeah.
you have to. If you don't laugh, what are we gonna do? Cry all day? I mean, I do that too, but
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to laugh about it because it's hard to live with disabilities. So through finding your own voice and your audience and everything, do you think that you've found your niche? And how would you explain your niche within the disabled community?
Ooh, that is interesting. I think, hmm, what is my niche? That's a good question. It's very well, if we're going off of art style, like my art is very bold. You know what I mean? Like the colors, it's very simple, like doodle drawing, um, like a little bit of shading, right? And I think it just goes along with like I want to create like a bold style and like have bold words behind it. If you
Mhm.
know what I mean? So I think that that kind of is my niche there is like angry, sarcastic, bold, if you know what I mean. And kind of
Absolutely.
more fun. I like to make it a little bit more fun instead of, and not to be, everybody's like, oh, don't be toxic positive. I'm like, I'm not being toxic angry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, you have to joke and make light of stuff that's very difficult because how else are we supposed to, deal we're constantly
Right.
inundated with all of this stuff. And, you have stickers that's like disabled and angry and fatigued AF. Like,
Yeah.
you say exactly how you're feeling, and I think you do a great job with that. Is there any advice that you'd give to a young artist with disabilities?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to try new mediums and try anything, don't be afraid to like adapt your technique to what you need. I've actually seen a lot of MS artists have like braces. Oh, and one of them had like, oh, I can't remember. It was like some device and it helped like keep their hand steady. And had I known, I'm like, just kidding. My arm, it's like my whole arm. So yeah. And I think like, don't be afraid to like, just be loud and honest. And like, you don't have to always say, oh, I'm like feeling happy or sad because there's a lot of sad. There's a lot of like, and that's great. That's great, right? It's not, but you're also allowed to feel other things and be very honest with how you're feeling and just how you come out into the world. I think that disabled art is really important because it's a part of disability culture. And a lot of disability culture has been kind of hidden from us
Mhm.
and from history. And, there's not a lot out there. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you think people have like responded to you in person? Like do you like we kind of talked about how it feels a little bit cathartic and liberating to talk about this stuff and get it off your chest, and art in itself is very cathartic. Has anyone come to you about your art and explained from their perspective with their disability how your art made them feel?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, I'm like, not to toot my own horn or like anything like that, but I haven't had any bad comments so far. I'm
Good.
sure they'll come eventually. They always do, right? I've
Yeah.
been waiting for it every day. Um, that's bad. But yeah, I mean, I think they just feel seen. And I think like some of the stuff, like the disabled and angry post is really what launched a lot of like, oh, like I think people are like looking for this, right?
Mm,
And so after I did that one post, I started to go a lot more down the political route and, saying, I don't know, I don't think it's inflammatory, but saying the truth, right? And so I think people really related to that and they liked hearing me say it. So yeah, I get a lot of comments, a lot of really good feedback on it and how they feel seen and yeah, a lot of like shares. So I know that people get it and are feeling it too.
do you sell your art in person as well?
I haven't yet. It's been less than a year still.
Oh,
I used
wow.
to. Yeah, I used to with my big acrylic paintings and stuff. So I'm used to like showing in that type of setting and format, like setting up in like a gallery area and then leaving it up for like a month and then you go back and get it right. I think
Mhm.
everybody knows that. But yeah, it's been less than a year since I opened my shop up and started doing this. So,
That's extremely impressive because you have a really big following already, and it's hard to, get an audience, and you've done an impeccable job of, finding your people and people who are drawn to your messaging, and yeah, you're doing a great job so far.
well, thank
Um,
you.
any advice that you would give to anyone younger dealing with the disabilities that you have? Anything that helped you along the way?
Ooh. I just I'm trying to think. Um, Man, I was gonna say a really bad answer. I was gonna say weed. Um, edit that out. Um, but I mean, it's a tool, right, for
Yeah.
MS. I honestly, I am still figuring a lot about it, because do have pediatric MS, but I was only diagnosed at 21.
Mhm.
But my neurologist could go back and see like, "Oh, you've had MS for, like, your whole life," because I had so much scarring on my brain and my spinal cord.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm trying to look back and, like, really think, I'm like, "What helped me?" But, I'm still figuring it out as, like, a 28-year-old because it's only
Mhm.
been, like, 7 years. I'm like, "Oh my god." But, yeah, I honestly think, like, digital art is if you can't find like a contraption to help your hands and stuff or if you're having a hard time with like line work, give digital artwork a go, I guess. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking. And then just don't push yourself too much because like for me my art takes me about like 3 or 4 days to finish sometimes.
Mhm.
And it's funny because if you look at it it's really simple, right? But even me just getting like the shapes down can be still quite difficult on there. So yeah.
Well, it looks incredible. What do you think is the most important message that you would want people to know who aren't familiar with your disabilities and also with your art?
Ooh, a message.
Even if it's like from a political perspective, for example, like I think what I'm trying to do with my art is I think things get so divisive, and if we have to take this part out, that's fine. But things get so divisive that, like we all need to work together to make change, right? Like half
Yeah.
of us can't make the change that we want. We have to all work together. So I think
Yeah.
that sometimes what I try to do is explain my conditions from a personal perspective so that it's not like your side is right, my song is like no one's side is right or wrong. It's like, hey, this is
Right.
what I'm experiencing based on the laws that are being put in place, and how can we collectively make this better for everyone, because it's not just affecting me, it's affecting other people. So for you, like, is there any messaging that you try to, like,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
yeah, talk to your
Yeah,
audience with?
so I don't so much talk about my own personal disabilities and illnesses and not that, I think it comes back to like being vulnerable and stuff for me and I'm like, I just don't want to be I'm definitely one of those people that I don't want to be seen for just one thing, as in like I don't just want to be seen as being disabled. Same thing like with being gay. I don't just want to be seen for being gay. I just want to be seen as like me as a person, right?
Mhm.
So like that's one thing I haven't like ventured into. But I think my message is mostly I think it's really important that more people in the online community and social media who have a following, they need to speak out more and be more political. It is something that really bugs me that there's a lot of people, especially in the chronically ill community, and I think like yeah, when you have an invisible disability, a lot of the time I think there is privilege that comes with that, in my opinion. I know that there's the viewpoint of there's privilege with having like a um a physical disability that everybody can see all the time because then they know you're disabled and they won't question you. And so that's a perspective that people with invisible illnesses have. But I also think that it is an incredible privilege to be able to hide, and just be able to not be seen. Because I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user and
Mhm.
mobility aid user, so I don't have to use my stuff, right? But I do think it's a problem because I think, people who are disabled artists in the community, they can't get away from that, if that makes sense. Like if it physically shows all the time.
Mhm.
But with invisible illnesses, you can. And so I think it's incredibly important that our group doesn't forget that we have a role to play and we still have to be, we have to stand up for everybody in the community,
Mhm.
right? And we also have to it's the time to be political right now. It's time to speak up and to make it known, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to be heard so much that it's easy to be like focus on your stuff, but it's the community as a whole, right? It's like
Yes.
everyone needs to contribute so that we see the full picture and can
Yeah.
collectively make it better for everyone.
Yeah. I'm very community oriented, like very much want to include everybody. I try to think of, I don't make specific, I try not to make very specific posts all the time. I try to just, it's very, open and broad so that everybody can be included in that. Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of people, especially in the chronic illness community, are kind of uncomfortable with the word disabled too.
Mm.
So one of the reasons why I also say disabled a lot more lately and like within my post is because I want people to know like you can have a disability, right, but not be disabled, or you can be just disabled, right? um, but it's not a dirty word if you just have a disability, right? Because people aren't willing to say that. You know what I mean? So if a woman just has endometriosis, for example, and nothing else, and she doesn't feel disabled, right? Or she's not, she won't say she has a disability. She'll just say I have endometriosis or a health issue.
Mhm.
But the D word is kind of dirty. So,
Yeah, that's been an interesting thing that I've noticed online too. I think there's been stigmas put with some words, but I like when I see posts that it's like it's not a bad word. Disability is okay, and it's good to talk about these things and explore what it means to different people. And sometimes
right,
certain words make others uncomfortable, but the more you talk about them, the more comfortable and more knowledgeable people become, and then it doesn't become this taboo, scary thing to talk about
right.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's why, I use the D word whenever I can.
Yep. Anything else you'd like to share about you and your art?
Ugh, not that I can think of. I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered a lot, yeah, of I,
Okay.
yeah.
So Christina, thank you for coming on today. We really appreciate your time and for going into all of your disabilities. And I will be back next time with two other guests. And thank you for joining the Able Voices podcast.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.